The Beirut Port Explosion. Who's to blame? The Beirut Port Explosion is a terrible disaster in 2020 that was caused by 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate that was unsafely stored during the time. It started with a fire that began in a different warehouse that made its way to where the ammonium nitrate was being stored. As a result of this, one of the biggest non-nuclear explosions in history happened, devastating many families. These two images show the before and after effects of the explosion. As you can see, so much was destroyed. This news clip shows that the fireworks that were being stored with the ammonium nitrate, that are the little white specks in the smoke, are going off and happening right before the explosion. And as you see in the explosion, so much money and damage was done, and so many people's lives were lost and injured. Just like the 7 firefighters who were called to the scene and were not informed about the highly dangerous ammonium nitrate being stored. They all ended up dying because of the port officials' lack of communication. As you can see in the video, buildings, boats, and cars were destroyed, leaving 200 people dead, 7,000 injured, and 300,000 people were left homeless. Right next to where the ammonium nitrate was being stored is a grain silo which held 85% of Lebanon's grain supply, and it was all destroyed. Like I said earlier, port officials have known about how unsafe it is to store this amount of ammonium nitrate, but they just put it to the side like it does not matter at all. As I said earlier as well, port officials were aware of the hazards that came with storing 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate that was being stored in Warehouse 12. But failed to notify the public because they thought it was a 1 in a trillion chance of happening. But obviously, there was still a chance, and it did end up happening, causing the death of hundreds. This picture shows the warehouse and the grain silo that was right next to it, and that the devastation that was brought to the country of Lebanon, and just the sheer impact that it made, seeing that 1/4 of a port was taken out because of the port officials' lack of communication and just throwing things to the side, just looking out for themselves. The National Library of Medicine said, prior to the blast, there were no notifications to public or other agencies to allow for population protection in terms of rapid evacuation or sheltering in place. This quote shows that the port officials were trying to protect themselves from getting in trouble with the law. It also shows how if the port officials swallowed their pride and owned up to their mistakes, it could have saved many people from death and injury, because now all the blood is on their hands, including these firefighters I talked about earlier. Judge Baitar, who is the man above in the picture, attempted to hold port officials that were aware of ammonium nitrate being stored accountable, but his efforts were quickly met with fierce resistance, including lawsuits filed by politicians, parliamentary immunity claims, and, in late 2021, a complete judicial freeze. The investigation was at a standstill for nearly 2 years, says ArabCenterDC.org. This shows that port officials had powerful people backing them up that also knew about what was being stored in Warehouse 12, and stalled the investigation to try to make people forget about the disaster and them as much as possible. But amidst the despair, there is a cautious sense of possibility, especially with Lebanon's changing political dynamics and Hezbollah's weakening. If Judge Baitar is allowed to proceed without interference, if charges lead to arrests, and trials are held in open court, this could mark the beginning of a new chapter, not just in the port blast case, but in Lebanon's broader struggle for accountability and for an end to Hezbollah's capture of the state.
You know why? Your anger is my source of optimism.
France's President Macron is the first world leader to visit, mobbed by crowds at the port pleading with him for help.
Port and customs authorities sent letters warning of the dangers of storing the chemical ammonium nitrate. One of the letters was believed to have been sent between 2016 and 2017, says GoGill.com.
According to reports, the ammonium nitrate sat in the port for 7 years, while government officials bickered over who was responsible for it.
It's criminal negligence at best. They knew what this was, they knew what it meant, and yet this material It was left to language in Beirut's port.
Diving deeper into it, the blame could be placed on the Russians. As GoGale.com also says, the extremely volatile ammonium nitrate had been stored in the port for 7 years prior to the explosion, offloaded from a ship owned by a Russian businessman that arrived at the port and was abandoned in 2013. But the Russian businessman is not who's to blame, because at ports, this happens all the time and is normal.
A day on from the bloodshed, authorities have announced that an unspecified number of port officials have been placed under house arrest. That, as it emerged, the blast involved some 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate stored at the site after being seized from a ship in 2013. The chemical compound is a component of fertilizer that, in certain conditions, can be explosive. A letter seemingly written by the head of the port's customs department has been widely circulated online. If authentic, it shows that its author warned repeatedly of the threat posed by the stockpile and repeatedly asked for it to be removed. The state prosecutor in charge of the investigation has ordered a full review of all documents and correspondence concerning the materials stored at the port. In the immediate hours following the blast, speculation was rife that it could have been the result of a targeted attack. With criminal negligence now the main line of inquiry.
To sum it up, all these things point to that the port officials are who to blame for the Beirut Port Explosion.